Megan. I'm an adult services librarian for the Aurora Public Library District. Usually I work at the EO Road branch over on the east side of town. But I'm on the Cape Cod committee every year because graphic novels are one of my things. So we have with us today 3 people who I met through the Graphic Novels and Comics Roundtable, which is a subcategory of the ALA, the American Library Association. So it's literally a professional organization for librarians to talk about. So here in person with us, we have Solene Holmes. Solene Holmes is a librarian and the Information Services Department Chair at Academy of the Sacred Heart in New Orleans, Louisiana. She's the secretary for the Graphic Novels and Comics Roundtable, and the co-chair of ALSC's Children and Libraries Editorial Advisory Committee. She has co-authored a chapter for ALA's forthcoming book, Mental Health and Children's Literature, Evaluating, Curating, and Sharing Books with Children. So hello, Solene, thank you for joining us.
Hello, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for being here.
Online with us today, we have Ariel Pomputius. Ariel is a Health Services Liaison Librarian at the University of Florida, providing instruction, reference, research consultation, and collection development services to 8 different departments in the College of Medicine. She manages a small collection of graphic novels in the Health Science Center Library. She teaches courses on graphic medicine and patient narratives to undergraduates, leads workshops on graphic medicine for medical students, and includes comics and comic creators in her grant projects. The focus on graphic medicine in her research and teaching is actually just a decades-long justification for a comic drawing class she took in college that had her parents asking, what are you going to do with that? So hello, Ariel. I'm glad you could join us. And then we also have with us Nancy Cope, who is the executive director of the Freeman Book Awards, which recognizes quality literature on East and Southeast Asia for young adults and children. Formerly, she was a teacher trainer working at the University of Kansas, a line officer in the U.S. Navy, and a designer and dyer of textiles in Japan. Hello, Nancy. Nice to have you. I think you're muted, Nancy.
There we go. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming by.
All right. So let's start with a little bit of background. What is graphic medicine? What are we talking about when we say the term graphic medicine?
Graphic medicine is really it's just basically the combination of comics or graphic novels and medicine. So that can be anything from memoirs or like a web comic. It can be an informational pamphlet that's done in a graphic format. It covers a lot. So anything to do with medicine, but somebody else can add on too.
I've seen it covering everything from, yes, as you were mentioning, like graphic memoirs or webcomics to, I've seen some people use the argument for animation too, where it's some sort of sequential artwork that is explaining something related to the healthcare system. There are certainly also, there's like graphic public health, where people are doing public health messaging too. So medicine is very broad in this case. It's not just, medicine, but it's nursing and public health and dentistry and vet med and a little bit of everything. Yeah.
Well, when we look at the history of graphic medicine, we see how the definition has expanded over time. And I think we're at a point now where we're going to see it to continue to expand as the importance of it and the utilization of it becomes more recognized, especially the fact that we're having this discussion in a library, right? Because libraries are seed beds for growth. Libraries not only just for fun, but to affect a change in its patrons. And graphic, quote unquote, medicine is uniquely positioned to encourage this growth. It started out very narrowly with the idea that there were like pathological autobiographies of people who were in illness and their experience, and then caregivers' relationships to the people who were ill. and then perhaps professional caregivers like doctors and nurses. But truly, the definition has expanded. When we look at even the Aurora Public Library's catalog and you type in graphic medicine, you get a limited number of titles. But when you type in graphic health, you get a threefold amount of titles. And therefore, I would posit that we're moving from a strict graphic medicine idea into the more idea of graphic health. And that's very exciting, very, very exciting. Yeah.
So from what you were just saying, that segues right into my next question. We were talking a little bit about the history. So when and how did people first start to conceive of graphic medicine as a specific thing that has a name, you know, that has a purpose? How did we start talking about this and recognizing that this is a thing?
So I mean, graphic medicine views like public health, brochures. I think they started off as like 12-page, 15-page little notices with graphics and information about public health, and that started in the 1940s. But the term itself, graphic medicine, is attributed to Dr. Ian Williams. And he was actually starting a graphic medicine website, and he was like thinking, what should I call this website? And he called it graphic medicine. And so from then on, he's attributed with like coining this term and this phrase. And I think, like Nancy was saying, it's just expanded too. So this graphic medicine is not used, it's used to train medical professionals, but then it's also used as a form of therapy. It's used for informed consent, also to educate patients about medical procedures. And when I say it's used as a form of therapy too, that can be therapeutic both for the creator, who's bringing their innermost thoughts and feelings to life and to the page and putting them out there, and that can be therapeutic to get it out of your head and actually say it and address it. But then it's also therapeutic for the reader, who is reading this and looking at it and seeing the visual images along with the text and saying, I'm not alone in this, or hey, I've had that same feeling and that person had it too, so it's not so weird, and this person's a successful creator, so I can do something great too. This doesn't have to like change my whole life. And they also give advice too in a lot of these graphic memoirs about what you can do, ways to cope, anxiety, stress reducing strategies, like try yoga, do some deep breathing, and they will take you through how to do that too.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it is interesting how a lot of people were doing it before, and then Ian just kind of gave it a name. And so I love when I meet people who are like, I didn't know this existed. I didn't know that I was already starting to do this with my own work as a creator, or I was collecting it as a librarian, or using it to teach as an educator. But then there was a term for it, and a community of people who I could, get inspiration from and book recommendations and have conversations about it. But yeah, as Celine mentioned, back in the day, they were using comics to talk about like malaria or other public health issues. And then, we've had infographics and all sorts of other things. And then as graphic memoir started to emerge as a form. So it is really interesting how it kind of was around for a long time, and now it has a name and a community, and that has really helped it grow and become more in the public eye.
I think it's also important to recognize taking away the theme of medicine from the utilization of the comic format. It's kind of like, because it's medicine, this has given the and health, that has given the comic a validity that it did not have before. There are certain structural aspects of the comic format that work wonderfully with the idea of health, wellness, medicine, right? That other formats, whether they be just visual, like those pamphlets from the 40s, and I grew up in the 50s and they gave you one of those pamphlets on now you are a woman, right? And that and then just text or just text and pictures. What is it about the comic format that gives it the power of catharsis? What is it about the way the comic is structured that allows multiple interpretations? You know, us people in the book business, in academia too, are very by now accustomed to the phrase, books are mirrors, doors, and windows, right? So what do we want to do? We want to increase multiple perspectives so that our person and our state, our city, and our culture grows. So I can talk more about that. I'll let other people chime in. But there's something about the comic format, specific things that functions this way to improve our country. Just by being here, we're doing national security work. You know, my job is to promote the books to school teachers and librarians about East and Southeast Asia. And there's always this pushback. What do we need this for? You know, well, research shows that when you open the window for looking at other people and cultures, when you hold up the mirror to those people and cultures, right? Things improve. Multiple perspectives improves society. Multiple perspectives improves a corporation, improves the military, improves everything. Because if you only have one perspective, you're shutting yourself off from creativity. Comics are the vehicle at the moment that is affecting cultural change.
So that is, I'm gonna skip ahead to one of my other questions. Why do you think people are drawn to comics as a way to talk about these stories? What is it about comics specifically?
I feel like I always start, but I can start. So I think comics and graphic novels, they're accessible to a lot of people. There's several different things about them. They're what's called multimodal. So that's the idea of combining text and visual images and reading those two together. So not just looking at the pictures, not just reading the text, but our brain is automatically reading those together. They also encourage a lot of imagination for you as the reader, because you as the reader are putting together what happens between each of those panels, what happens in that space between the panels, which we call the gutters. And so I think that they also allow for like the use of visualizing figurative language. I just read Box in My Brain, which is about this cyclical type of bipolar. They're actually starting to call it bipolar 3. And like her what she's seeing and what she's feeling is shown as this fox. And when she's feeling depressed, the fox is in black and white. But when she's in this manic phase, the fox is in color and it's like all hyper and excited. And so there's these images are things that I think can stick with people, maybe sometimes more so than text, especially if you're a visual learner. And they're also the use of text containers. So that's like your speech bubbles, your thought bubbles. And with graphic novels, it's so cool because you can have a character in the speech bubble saying one thing to the person they're talking to, but then you get to see their innermost thoughts because there's this thought bubble up here going like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be talking to this person right now. I'm so anxious and nervous. And so you really get to, I think you can relate to the characters too, because you're hearing their side of the story and their point of view. I'll let somebody else chime in too. I could go on, but
No, I was gonna say, and I love that you kick off the answers lead, so I'm happy to let you keep doing it. I think that comics can be a good way, as you were saying, like that's something about the combination of images and words, being able to say something that images and words alone can't say. So in medicine, you know, when you go to your doctor, you might say like, oh, I have a sharp pain, or I have a dull pain, or I feel like I'm in a cloud. You're already trying to find a way to describe things that you're feeling with words. And sometimes that falls short and your doctor's like, what are you talking about? And so sometimes having that image of, you know, like, this is what it feels like, but depicted on a page. And so going with my description to give a more clear picture about what you are experiencing. I also think that comics can be very accessible. I will say I've worked in comics with some of my colleagues, and sometimes I realize that visual literacy is not something that we all speak at the same level. So we've had some comic disagreements about like, what is the meaning of this page? But a lot of times a comic is pretty accessible. Maybe we're not getting exactly the same message, but we are understanding it at some level that relates to us and that helps us connect to the story. And then I also think that as creators, it can be accessible too. I love that graphic medicine has, you know, like very professional, polished, beautiful graphic novels, but there's also like web comics like Hyperbole and a Half, which is kind of sketchy MS Paint. And both of them tell stories that we can all connect with. So I talk to students a lot about like, okay, you don't have to be a professional artist. You can tell your own stories visually and with words in this comic style. And, you know, if the XKCD guy can tell like a really heartwarming story about going through cancer, then you can use stick figures to share your stories too, and that's totally okay. So it's very accessible as in creating and in reading as well.
Yeah, stick figures are interesting because in art history, there's a long line of artists throughout different cultures, and even way back as long in Japan, from 1,000 years ago, people were depicted without emotions. They were just like a white face and a little dot for the eyes and a straight line for the nose and a straight line for the mouth. And art historians always say that the reason these illustrations from 1,000, 1,200 years ago were drawn like this so that the literate class, the aristocrats, of course, were able to identify with the character. Whereas if they had been drawn with more detail, it would have been more difficult to have this identification. So one of the powers of comics is derived from its more simplified illustration. Now, of course, I'm generalizing here, but in many cases for graphic medicine, especially those that are produced by people with illness as a therapeutic practice, the illustrations might be less detailed than we find as if compared to those of professional book illustrators. So a simplification of the image helps with identification. Another thing that was mentioned was the fact of comics allows the simultaneous time and also linear time, the flow of time. You're able in a comics to look at both of these times at the same time. And again, it gives you it breaks your bubble of being right here. It increases your sense of identification. So you can see a larger time and a more specific time, right? And that can be through the use of comics. We also find that, speaking of these different perspectives, there's different planes of reality, right? There's the emotional reality, there's the physical reality. They can be in the same comic cell at the same time. And so there's this movement in your brain, right? Between, thinking and feeling, past and present, future, all these different modalities, all these different perspectives are available through comics, which you might not get through a text or through an image or a combination of text and image. We mentioned the word gutter, right? Well, there are in other cultures, Chinese culture, for instance, where there's been image with accompanying text. This is traditional in Asia, but it didn't promote this movement between different different perspectives. There was just one perspective. This comic with the gutter, right? What people who study this academically are saying, that the use of the gutter, the space between the comic cells, allows you to project, allows you to say, what happens next? So therefore, then when your brain is thinking, what happens next? You're buying into the narrative. You're becoming a participant, which you're not doing in just consuming text or image or text image like in Chinese painting.
And along with that too, like when, like the creator, of course, is the one who's choosing where that gutter occurs and what you see. So there's sort of like a film director choosing what you see and kind of leading us to have those thoughts and those feelings that go along with those panels. And then I can add too, so I like, so this idea of externalizing to what's going on in your mind, a lot of the graphic novels, I work with elementary students, and so, but these are in adult graphic novels too, in graphic medicine, this idea of externalizing your thoughts. And I think that once you externalize something too, it's also then, for the creator, you can then kind of knock that down. So there's like this monster that's inside your head and you keep showing it, or this monster of depression that's constantly there. Like then you'll see a panel where maybe after they've sought help, they can knock that monster down and you see it crumble. And I think that image, those images are just so powerful to see and to have.
Yeah, sometimes you're almost like capturing it outside of you, and you can sort of see it in a more objective manner now that it's out, you know, in the world, and it's as opposed to just in your head.
Well,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I am reminded of Richard Rohr, who's a monk in the New Mexico desert. And one of his sayings is, pain that is not transformative is transmitted, right? One of the things about graphic medicine is that it allows the creation of a different narrative of illness. Human beings are body-based. A lot of our image is how we look, right? How we present our bodies to other people. When you're ill, that relationship with your body is disturbed, right? You need to come up with another relationship, another story. And this is one of the things that this graphic medicine or graphic health will allow you to do, is to and to come up with another story about yourself. So the pain is transforming you. And this is a tool that will help you to transform it.
And to go along with that too, there's actually this field of therapy called superhero therapy. It was invented by somebody named Janina Scarlett. She was Ukrainian. She survived Chernobyl. And it literally has people create their own origin stories. And so you become this, like the superhero, and you see that even superheroes have these flaws. And so, but they're still super. So you can be super too. And it's like cognitive behavioral therapy that helps you claim your story and put it out there.
So that, and this segues really well into one of my other questions, which is how can graphic medicine be used for educational purposes?
So I think they're, you go ahead first.
No.
Somebody else.
No, I was gonna say, go ahead.
No.
So I just started a class this past week where we are going to be talking about health disparities faced by people with uteruses. And the graphic medicine, sometimes we forefront the graphic medicine side, and this time we're kind of trying to forefront the like underserved and underrepresented populations. But we're supplementing with a lot of graphic medicine materials. And part of the difficulty when we first start this class is telling the students like these comics cover hard topics. So yes, it's a comic. Yes, it may be drawn in a style that you're like, oh, it seems kind of light and goofy. But then it'll be talking about like miscarriage or intimate partner violence or like the trials and tribulations of childbirth. So all of these things that are kind of intense. And so making sure that they're, prepared to go into this content and have this discussion afterwards about these hard topics. And it's interesting because at first they're like, oh, but comics means it's funny. And certainly some of them can take kind of a humorous, like looking back, this story is more humorous than we thought it was. But a lot of them are like, no, this is actually a really tough topic, and there is not a humorous side to this. So I've appreciated that comics can make it very accessible. They always talk about how it's they hadn't necessarily thought of that perspective, or maybe they connect with that perspective. And so it's made it very easy to talk about these difficult things. Whereas I worry that if we had to, read text, it might just be kind of overwhelming. And the comic format has made it easier to talk about some really difficult topics in the courses that I've worked on. So, yeah. What were you going to say, Celine?
Oh, I was just gonna say too, there have been studies done about, like even with Harvard Business School and, people like who learn from comics and graphic novels, because Harvard Business School and a couple other schools, have started using comics for case studies, and, there have been, that people remember better from the comic book rather than just the textbook version. And the students will come up after and be like, what's next? And, the professor said, like, I don't normally get that kind of question, like, you take the exam and you're done. And so I think that's one really helpful way. Also, like you were saying, it also makes it okay to talk about these topics. Like, for a long time, topics like mental health have been pretty taboo in our society. But I think putting it out there in a graphic novel format as an informational text, even if it's a memoir, you still learn from it, and it's still educational. Then I think I mentioned briefly earlier, but a lot of them, and this is the way I use them with my younger students, is a lot of them have these, things that you can do of, here are suggestions if you're feeling anxious. It's okay to feel anxious. And a lot of them will also not only have suggestions of like things to do or be telling a story, a narrative story, but they'll also have these little breakout boxes where they have scientific facts about like, well, really this is what your brain is doing when you're feeling anxious. Or this is what you're doing, the people who have OCD, this is what's happening to like the serotonin levels in your body. So you can also, they're written, a lot of them, so that they are specifically educational too. I was going to say something else, but I forgot. So.
Well, how to use these graphic novels in education? What we want to do is encourage, first of all, kids to read. When kids don't read, part of their brain is not developing. So lots of times, graphic novels and graphic medicine, they're called an on-ramp or scaffolding to get the kids more interested in more reading. So that's one function that they provide. Another function is dealing with the emotional turmoil that young people have these days. I don't know whether maybe years ago, people didn't just report emotional turmoil. Is it really increasing? It doesn't matter compared to the past. The fact of the matter is now there's more emotional turmoil for more children. And finding that they're not alone, right? Finding that they're not unique, finding that there is a community of others. This cannot but help them to progress more successfully in their lives. And again, you know, it's not just schools that need to do this. Libraries do this too, right? Libraries are, as I said earlier, a seedbed for growth and for growing the young person, and adults too. Adults, you know, you're never finished changing and growing, but especially for children, this format is very, very important to promote.
I was also going to say too, also for people with English not as a first language, it also is very good for educating for like informed consent or procedures. There's this famous example in the graphic medicine world about I think it was a mom who was supposed to put an ointment on her child and it said once daily, but once looked like once, O-N-C-E in Spanish, which is 11 times. And so she was allegedly putting it on 11 times. But if we had, you know, a graphic image to show what you're really supposed to do, it breaks down that language barrier too.
Yeah, that's an important point too. And I think, you know, here at the library, we get a lot of people who are learning English as a second language. A lot of ways, it makes English more accessible to them. You have kind of the support of the pictures to help you parse or make sense of the text as you're learning it.
Yeah, I actually just had a parent because there is still I still come across the stigma against graphic novels in the library from parents sometimes and other educators. And this parent said, well, I want my kid to read some real books. And she said, unless you think graphic novels are okay. And so I was like, okay, you opened the door for me to explain all of the benefits of graphic novels. And one of them that I talked about was that they are able to use, and most of them for younger readers too, use this bigger vocabulary because you have the context of the images and kids can figure out what the word means. And so they can use it. I mean, there were even informational comic books for kids to learn SAT words now and stuff too. So
yeah, and that really touches on a lot of why we have this event that you are all attending at this time. You know, like people, our support as professionals for comics and pop culture, things that people kind of tend to view as less educational or less. I'm not sure what the word is. But we see those as a medium, you know, helping people have a stronger relationship with reading and with the library.
Right.
If they feel positively about reading in the library, they'll keep coming back. If they have a good relationship, you know, as Nancy mentioned, there's kind of a scaffolding effect sometimes where reading might be intimidating to you. English is not your first language. You have dyslexia, et cetera. And comics can kind of be a door into that. Oh, I had such a great time with this. You know, I want to try this instead. I want to try, you know, kind of moving on.
So in the Aurora Public Libraries, how are these books shelved? Is there a specific area where the patron can go, like when they go in the door, there they are, right? To draw them in, or are they shelved by topics with, you know, just regular books?
So graphic novels have their own section, and then within that section, they're subdivided the way that books are. So fiction is its own section, and then nonfiction is Dewey Decimal, just like nonfiction is. So I'm trying to be mindful of our time here. Let's talk a little bit about your personal interests and personal recommendations. So how did you personally get interested in graphic medicine?
Well, I wasn't. I wanted to, this is one of the, where is it? Here it is. Okay. This is one of the winners of the Freeman Book Awards. It's a graphic novel on Minamata disease, which is mercury poisoning in Japan. And this is mercury poisoning is still going on throughout the world and is still a problem, especially in countries that do gold mining. Because by the process of breaking down gold nuggets from other minerals, a lot of mercury is used. So this is the book that I was familiar with. And then when I saw a call for panelists for this event, I said, oh, I can talk about this book. But I quickly realized that the story is bigger than just one disease or one country. That graphic medicine now is this whole panoply of topics and treatments. I might mention that one of the things that I liked about graphic medicine, learning about it, is that sometimes there's solutions. And this book is about a college student who was assigned the topic of the Minamata mercury poisoning disease. And he was really mad because he said, that was 50 years ago. What do I have to study that for? And I sort of felt the same way until I related to it personally. The town I grew up in, New Jersey, just finished a lawsuit which started in 2020. When did it start? It started in 1987 about pollution in the town I grew up in New Jersey. And it just got solved last year, right? So it's the same thing with Minamata disease, obfuscation, delay, nasty strike tactics, Yakuza beating up on people who are protesting the mercury poisoning. Then when I found out that this was like in my hometown in New Jersey, boy, this book meant a whole lot to me afterwards. So that's, again, the relational aspect of it, right? But I just also want to mention some other books. This is a wonderful book. This just came out. It is a submission to the 2024 Freeman Book Awards. This is a book that is it's age 16, in case, I guess the camera is making it backwards. Age 16. And this is a story of eating disorders, which is definitely graphic medicine, right? Okay. And the reason it was submitted to the Freeman Book Awards is that it deals not only with the girl who Canadian American, Chinese Canadian, who grew up in Toronto with the eating disorder. It also talks about her mother growing up in Hong Kong in the 70s and her grandmother growing up in China in the 50s. So this is a good contender for this year's Freeman Book Awards. So I really recommend this because it shows it's not just the illness in so many books. This has a timeline showing, some of the foundations of the disability or illness or health challenge is a better way to put it, I guess. So I recommend both of these books, and Minamata's Story and Age 16. There. Oh, where'd she go?
No, we lost Ariel.
Well, I can go ahead and so I was preparing a presentation about just graphic novels in general as informational texts, and I came across graphic medicine and I thought it was really, really cool and learned more about it. And so I was reading different graphic novels, and one that I came across was T. Beck Harrison's In Between Days, and it was about her struggle with breast cancer. My mom had just passed away suddenly, not from breast cancer or cancer, but it was just the way she was so open and talking, and I had not really talked about my mom's death yet and was still in that grieving process. And that graphic novel helped me kind of get through it, because she was going through her own grieving. And it made it for me like, oh, things might be better if I actually talk to another human being about what I'm feeling too. And then one of my all-time favorites is Kristen Radke's. I'm gonna just look at the whole title because so it's called Steep You, A Journey Through American Loneliness. And it's like part memoir, but it's also part science because she goes through these scientific studies about loneliness. She goes through sociological studies about how we as humans have changed and what we're doing. We don't go outside as much. We don't interact personally, like physically with people as much. And that could be distancing us. And she cites like the Surgeon General talking about how the greatest plague of our, I'm just quoting this right now, but the greatest plague of our country right now is isolation and loneliness. And just, it was her stories too, like Nancy said, they're really relatable. And it's like, oh gosh, okay, maybe when I am feeling kind of lonely, if I call a friend, like she recommends doing in that, or go out and exercise, I suddenly feel better too. So that's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I apologize for my internet lapse. There's probably a thunderstorm above Gainesville right now, and it always makes my internet weird. I think I was interested in comics from the days of reading like the Sunday comics on the floor of the living room when I was able to read. And you were talking about you know, the importance of early literacy, Nancy. I absorbed so much manga. So comics were always there. And then it wasn't until I was in my career as a medical librarian that I was like, oh my gosh, there are comics about, and some of the comics that I read in the past, like I mentioned, Hyperbole and a Half, that are about the topics that I'm talking to medical students or undergraduates about. And reading those would make this a lot easier to talk about these topics. And so, yeah, it was always there in the background, and then realizing there's a word for it and there was an explanation for it, or a way to say like, we need more of this, is what really got me into it. I will say I personally have experienced some health issues, I guess, over the years. And so this year was the first year that I actually was like, I'm going to sit down and draw this. I've talked about the things that other people have drawn for a long time, but I'm going to talk about my own problems and how I've overcome or not overcome, just come to accept them. And that was really, it was really healing, and it was really interesting to talk to other people about them too. I haven't showed my parents them yet because I'm worried they'll be like, you shared what with strangers? But I found it really, really helpful for myself. And my personal, oh man, I was gonna say, I don't have my graphic medicine collection because I brought all of my books into work during the last hurricane. I was like, I'm gonna keep these safe by bringing them into my workplace. But my current favorite graphic medicine is Frida Kahlo, An Illustrated Life, which Frida Kahlo is a fascinating, you know, she's just a fascinating person, but she overcame so much throughout her life in terms of her health, from the time she was a child to her injury, and even onwards. So every time I'm kind of like, oh man, you know, everything I'm going through is really tough, I'll be like, okay, but Frida Kahlo can do this, then I can do this too. So yes, I highly recommend that. It's a very fun book. There's even like a recipe in the middle of it. And it's a really interesting way to see Frida Kahlo as a complex, multidimensional person.
All right.
Oh, you might mention that the graphicmedicine.org website has a list of recommended graphic medicine texts. So if you're a librarian looking to flesh out or start your collection, this is most of them are older, but still this is a good place to start. Yeah, graphicmedicine.org. And before we close, right, I have to tell you, if you want to know more about the Freeman Book Awards, I tried to put the URL in the chat, but it got garbled. Just Google Freeman, Freeman, Freeman Book Awards, and there's all sorts of great children's and young adult literature, including graphic novels, and including, if we want to consider this graphic medicine books dealing with this area of the world.
And on that, I'll add too that the Graphic Novel and Comics Roundtable, you do not have to be a member of the roundtable or of ALA to get access to, they come out with best graphic novels for children and best graphic novels for adults, lists of those and top 10 lists every year. And you can find all of those if you Google, I think just if you Google GNCRT best of, it will come up. And so they've got graphic medicine titles, and it's separated out in the children's category. If you're looking for certain age ranges too, it's separated out by ages. So that's a great resource too.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for joining us. I really appreciate it. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or anything that you want to talk about with us? We've got like a couple more minutes, I think. All right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I love having these conversations about comics,
Yes.
especially for our public audience to come join us. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for providing us with this opportunity to share our passion and to help us to learn more too, us presenters. Thank you.
Oh, yes. I always come away with all these book recommendations. So thank you so much.
Right.